Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. First things first, for T&D today, we have this gigantic #1 dad mug that I did not get for being a dad. I got instead from a bunch of my students when I was teaching, and they gave me this because they thought it was funny, I think. I don't know. It's a big mug. It's actually a really nice size, and I do enjoy using it. I finally unearthed it recently as I was going through some stuff, and I was happy to have it back in the collection. Inside of it, we have some Country Peach Passion from Celestial Seasonings. I almost dropped that. This again is a very nice sort of like light, fruity kind of tea. Not too strong. Good for later in the day if that is what you're looking for. So, first things first, I want to thank you guys for your patience on Wednesday. I have been in tech for and opening a show, and anybody in the performing arts world knows that that is a massive, crazy time commitment, and so I just ran out of hours in the day leading up to Wednesday to actually get something done. And then we had final dress leading into Thursday, so I couldn't get anything out. And so I appreciate you guys being patient and rolling with it to get to where we are now, which is an episode that was suggested by my patrons. So thank you guys so much for that. If you are interested in being a patron and being able to suggest topics for shows, check out my Patreon in the description of this episode. Anyway, getting into what we were talking about, we are talking today about something that I am actually kind of surprised that I haven't really hit on before, and it is what D&D shows can teach us about D&D. And this is a pretty big thing to tackle, and so I have broken it down into 3 main points that I think really sort of fill most of what we can actually take away from D&D shows in watching them, as there are hundreds of thousands of probably millions of hours of content on the internet for us to be able to consume in one way or another via YouTube or Twitch or podcast format or whatever. There's so much of it. There's so much actual play out there. So let's talk a little bit about what it is that we can actually get out of each of these things and what we can actually take from them in order to become hopefully better players, DMs, whatever, ourselves. So kicking it off, I have, again, 3 points. So number 1 here is something very simple, very straightforward. If you are not an experienced player, you're not an experienced GM, you are not somebody who really knows much of anything about D&D, but you really enjoy the medium and the format, it can teach you how to play the game. That's really kind of the end of that point. There's not a whole lot to extrapolate on there. In an adventuring academy, which is College Humor, Dimension 20, their sort of extra talkbacky kind of show, like separate from it at the same time. Brandon Lee Mulligan host, has a bunch of different people on. In one of the early episodes, Brian Murphy talks about how if there is somebody that has watched 2 seasons of Dimension 20 or listened to a bunch of NADPOD or seen a bunch of Critical Role, you are perfectly equipped to play or run a game. There is nothing stopping you from doing that by being able to watch that. And if you have the basic ability to follow along with what is going on, like if you have a character sheet in front of you, and every time the DM says, okay, make an athletics check, you look down and you go, okay, that's where that is, and this is the scenario in which they're using it. That's all you need. You just need to have a general sense of how the game flows. I understand that there are plenty of people out there who would disagree with that statement. Like, it's not necessarily you will be great at the rules of the game, but it is that you have a good enough grasp on the way that the game itself works for you to be able to play it, for you to be able to run it, for you to be able to do anything like that. And honestly, you can see people learning how to play the game in real time in a lot of these shows. My favorite example of that is Robbie Damon in Critical Role, EXU. He has never really played before, and he gets to come on and play. And don't get me wrong, I adore Amy Carrero as well. She's another phenomenal example. But Robbie we get to hang on to for longer, so you get to see it develop over a longer course of time. It's really the only reason. I think Amy is a phenomenal player as well, who we get to see blossom in all of these new ideas, because the reality is that new players who have not played the game before bring in different perspectives and ideas of the way that things can work. And so in getting to see that and getting to see how that works, you gain the ability to be ready for those scenarios to come up, and you get a better sense of how to play the game, how to be ready for the game. And so the first thing that they can really teach you, how to play the game as a whole. I have learned a lot from it, even though I've read every single word that has been published by Wizards in 5th edition. I have learned a whole lot just from watching these shows, because they give me active engagement in the way that the words actually interact with the game that it represents. So, number 1, how to play the game. Number 2 is a little bit funkier. How to adapt settings, scenarios, concepts, all of that. And this one is something that normally, without any, outside influence, no other shows, no other mediums, nothing like that, you would have to do over the course of years and years and years of playing time, which is crazy to be able to build up that amount of a repertoire in doing that. So the fact that we have all of these shows led by people who have been running for a very long time, or led by professional story writers, led by, all of these different really phenomenal people who are ingrained in the storytelling industry in one way or another, it shows us a lot of different ways to adapt different scenarios, settings, and concepts to Dungeons and Dragons in real time. So good examples of that, Dimension 20 is having their charity auction right now, where they're auctioning off a lot of the Crown of Candy miniatures. Crown of Candy is Game of Thrones, but in Candyland format. It's a really good show while having a fun, weird skin. It's a good show on how to do the brutal survivalist kind of gameplay that some people are looking for. Minimal magic for the most part. Really kind of gritty and dark and heavy in the way that they have that worked out. There are things that are absolutely horrifying to interact with. We'll stick with Dimension 20 for a lot of this because it is a very good, diverse sort of thing. Unsleeping City, it is how to put it in a modern setting and have it be a layered perspective over active Earth. It takes place in New York. It's about the magical side of New York. That's all you need to know about it right there. Fantasy High, also Dimension 20, is yet another thing. This one's a little bit more traditional. It's a adventuring school, so obviously it fits the more adventure-y kind of bill, but it is exactly what you're looking for. The Adventure Zone Balance looks at a secret spy network kind of thing and being a part of that. I guess it's not really a spy network. It's like an agency. It's like an adventuring agency. So there's a lot of fantasy elements to it, but there's also not. Dungeons and Daddies, the first campaign, Odyssey, entirely about taking real world people and transplanting them into a Dungeons and Dragons world and having them figure out how they are operating within that space. There are so many of these things, and this one is actually one where if you're looking for ways to adopt funky sort of scenarios, Critical Role doesn't really fit the bill. You have to look elsewhere, and it's kind of unique in that way. But these are the sort of things where you simply would have to play through them if you were not able to consume this media elsewhere. You would have to come up with the concepts, figure out how to build them into the engine, and then play them, and then tweak the engine, and then play them and tweak the engine in order to actually get a good picture of them. But all of these have been developed by, again, these professionals in the storytelling industry, for lack of a better way to say it. And so we get the final product up front, and we can look at it and go, oh wow, that's really cool. Here are the couple of things I would change. And then when you go to do it, you have a really great baseline to work off of, and then you can change the couple of things that you wanted to change in your game. In the same sort of breath here, we're talking about archetypes, character archetypes, the way that characters are. Critical Role is a really phenomenal character study kind of show. It is so centered around those characters for all of the extensive long campaign, and I know that it gets to be kind of terrifying to try and consume that much media, and so I'm not necessarily suggesting you do that, but if you take a look at it and you do manage to sit down and go through the entirety of, say, campaign 1, you can watch these brilliant character arcs develop, and it can give you a sense of how you could potentially develop a character arc over the course of a 6-month, year-long, 2-year campaign. if you're looking at a shorter game, again, Crown of Candy is actually a very good example for that. It is about 12 episodes long, I want to say, which means that it is about 12 sessions long, which is not an unreasonable length for a campaign. And you have some really, really awesome, phenomenal, unique characters in there. Sakurina is a really good example of that, because she is such a specific type of character. And the other thing is that you find these certain players that will fill these bizarre kind of archetypes because they are looking at the mechanics of them and then making them into characters that actually work. So much of the drag sometimes of trying to get a character to work is you want these mechanical things to work together, but you can't figure out how to tie them together. Emily Axford, Marisha Ray, they're both really, really great at setting up those kind of characters that have these elements from different places and just deliver on them. And they get a lot of hate from people online because they're loud. They like to nitpick certain things, but they do phenomenal work in those settings, and I highly recommend taking a look at them and the way that they are playing those characters, the way they have built those characters, to really get a good sense of how that is affecting essentially the way that the game operates around them, because that is a really, really fantastic representation of how to adapt a specific sort of archetype, a specific sort of idea into a character. And there are so many more than just those two, but they are the two that really jump out because they are the two on two of the biggest shows. So that was number 2. Number 3, it's a big one, I think, and it is something that I believe has really expanded my abilities as both a player and a DM, and it ties back to number 1 a little bit here. It is how to think outside of the box. And honestly, it ties back to number 2. This, to me, is the single most important skill you can have as a Dungeons & Dragons consumer of any kind. They are so important. These skills, there we go, are so important. The ability to think outside the box is the most important thing that you can have in your arsenal, because it shows you different ways to play the game. It shows you how to adapt different settings. It shows you different ways to take a look at things and think about the way that they're going to interact with each other. Getting to see these people in front of you play this game, or listen to these people in front of you play this game, allows you, again, kind of like I said with number 2 here, it allows you to essentially consume visually, mentally, in whatever way you're consuming it, years upon years of experience playing the game. Every once in a while, an idea will come up that is so insane that you're like, surely that can't work. And you will sometimes see it in front of you on the screen or in your headphones or wherever you're listening or consuming it. And you'll go, oh my God, that is a possibility. That is a way for this to work. Let me look at other ways that I could adapt outside of this. During the EXU Calamity, I want to say, roundtable with Brendan Abria and Matt, there's a time in it where they talk about how players start with this massive imagination, this massive ability to just pick out any random thing and run with it and see where it goes. And as they learn the rules, they come down and they sort of go down this path where they find themselves sort of boxed in. And then eventually they come back all the way around to the unhinged side of crazy decision making. And that is the fun place to be a lot of the time. And so consuming the media here and consuming it from a diverse set of sources is an important piece of that. Allows you to get through that tunnel a little bit faster to come back around the outside and be able to make these insane choices. Just be able to walk up and take a look at a situation and go, I know this isn't how this is supposed to be used, but I wonder if my DM would let me do it. And if your DM doesn't let you do it, don't fight them on it. It's their table, ultimately. It's everyone's table. They're running the table. Don't fight them. It'll become this whole thing. But a lot of times DMs are looking for ways to reward players for trying to be creative, for trying to push the envelope a little bit here and give themselves a little bit of something different to really kind of work with. And so consuming these shows gives you a lot of the experience to build off of immediately in order to come out and come back with these crazier ideas. And that can be applied to if you're world building as a DM, if you're building characters as a player, if you are trying to write some plot hooks, if you are trying to write a backstory, if you're trying to just interact with the zombie that's sitting in front of you. There are so many ways that you can go about it that is just phenomenal. Recently, my players convinced a ghost dragon to take them on a little field trip to the Citadel of the Dead, where souls of the dead are judged and sent back out, that is currently being occupied by an army. The ghost dragon agreed on a natural 20 for a total of 37 persuasion check. Took them straight in and dropped them off. They bypassed the entire army that I had set up for them to walk through, circumventing what could have probably been and would have been hours of game time, a lot of prep time on my end. But it doesn't matter, because it was a bizarre idea that had very little chance of succeeding, but we went, you know what, we're going to see how this plays out. And honestly, I think that if they had tried to do that a couple of years ago, I would have been like, nope, this isn't going to work. There's no way this is going to work. There's no way this could possibly work. But in seeing the way that other GMs interact with the game, it helps you do that. Because really, one of the things that I think, and this is thinking outside of the box, or I promise it relates to thinking outside the box. One of the things that you do the most of that you don't really realize by watching and consuming these other shows is you get to see how far you can actually stretch the reality of the game without breaking it. So often you're so concerned with your tightly, carefully constructed plans that you're concerned if your players try and deviate from it. But then you go and you watch something like Dimension 20, or you listen to Dungeons and Daddies or NADPOD, and you just find out that, like, oh, they have a minivan in a fantasy realm, and they're fine. There's plenty of ways to counteract them having a minivan. Or, oh, they have spaceships or something like there are ways to counteract it. There's ways to get around it. There are ways to just be able to improv your way through it and figure it out as you go. And just because they circumvent some of your prep, honestly, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It'll come back some other time. You can file it away, and then the next time you have to build an army for people to get through, you just go, you dig through, take it out, reskin it, figure it out, reformat it for the current scenario, and you're good to go. That's all it takes, honestly. And so consuming these shows allows you to learn to think outside the box, learn to be adaptable in that way for all those weird scenarios that come up, and allows you to create those weird scenarios yourself. And so those are my three big things that consuming other D&D media, D&D shows, actual play, whatever you want, however you want to phrase it. Those are the three ways that they really, really benefit you. They teach you how to play the game. They teach you how to adapt settings, scenarios, archetypes, anything like that. And they teach you how to think outside the box, because those are three of the biggest, most important skills to be able to have, in my opinion, while you are playing, running, or interacting with D&D in just about any way. But that brings us to the end of what we were talking about today, which brings us to the shows that we have today and this weekend. First up today, we have Mayhem D&D, Off the Rails, Oxventure, Just Roll With It, The Strings of Fate, Rolling with Difficulty, World of Loathe, The Crown DM, and Coming Together Naturally. I should actually be on Coming Together Naturally coming up soon. I don't think it's this next episode that's coming up, but I want to say it's the one after that one. So, if you want to hear me do the D&D, check that out. Saturday, we have Dice Funk and Strange Hungers, and then Sunday, we have Super Idols, Roll For Your Life, Grinning Griffin, Dungeon Drunks, Library of Nightmares, The Chaos Brigade, there we go, Rise of the Forsaken, Chromatic Dice, The Strawcast, High Rollers, and Tabletop Notch. Go check them out. Fill your weekend with some D&D. Let me know, or let them know that I sent you, because, again, someday somebody's going to say something to me about it, and I'm going to think that it's funny. But, in direct line with what we're talking about today, go check them out. Teach yourself something, whether you know it or not, and hopefully find something that you actually really enjoy getting to consume, because so often it's hard to find new TV, media, something like that you're genuinely enjoying consuming. So hopefully you find something that you really like there. But with all that said, that's everything I have to talk to you guys about today. So thank you so very much for making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much in particular to my patrons. You guys are the ones that make this show, quite literally the one that I just did, possible. If you're interested in becoming a patron, again, check out the link in the description of this episode. I think that's it. So, with all that said, don't forget, everybody, drink tea, play D&D, and keep on rolling.